welcome to this episode of Winning Isn't Easy. We're going to talk about Unum. Unum is up to no good, as always. But what Unum does, other disability carriers do. So there are lots of lessons for everyone to learn. I'm Nancy Cavey. I'm a national ERISA and individual disability attorney. And before we get started, I've got to give you that legal disclaimer. The Florida Bar says that I have to say that this podcast is not legal advice. So now I've said that, but as you know, nothing will prevent me from giving you an easy to understand overview of the disability insurance world, the games that disability carriers play, and what you need to know to get the disability benefits you deserve. So off we go. As I said, we're going to talk more about Unum. And we're going to explore how they're doing everything in their power to deny or terminate benefits. As I've always said, carriers are in the business of making money, not paying you when you're disabled. It's important to remember that they're not looking out for you. They're looking out for their bottom dollar. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about Minnesota federal court rules that Unum's significant history of biased claims administration is not relevant to the termination of benefits. Next, Unum's handling of an employer misleading their employee who has brain cancer about how to convert a life insurance policy is reviewed by a court. And lastly, Unum's objection to a ERISA disability claimant's level of medical care during COVID overturned by a federal judge. Before we get started, we're going to take a quick break so you can think about these topics and how they may relate to your ERISA disability claim. Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy. Now, we're going to talk about a Minnesota federal court ruling that Unum's significant history of biased claims administration is not relevant to the termination of benefits. You know, I already don't like this decision. And that's because Unum has a well-known and significant history of biased claims administration that resulted in a multi-state agreement with Unum and a number of state attorney generals. Now, this was in 2005, and it addressed a number of Unum's claim handling techniques, including the use of internal peer review providers and biased, not so independent medical evaluators. I will tell you that Unum learned from this multi-state agreement to do a better job of sort of covering their tracks. But I don't think much has changed. They, of course, have been pushing back since then on the argument that their history of bias is old news and that they've cleaned up their act. I don't think that's the case, but let me tell you what the court in Minnesota did in the case of Elias versus Unum Life. Now, Elias was disabled as a result of a number of mental health conditions, severe low back pain, shoulder pain, and Unum paid disability benefits from 2008 until 2021. 13 years of benefits until Unum's peer-reviewed doctors concluded he had it miraculously improve, and he was able to go back to work in any occupation. Elias argued that Unum's decision to terminate his benefits was what's called an abuse of discretion. He argued that Unum selectively picked from the medical records to support its desired result and ignored evidence of Elias's disability. We call that cherry picking. Next, he argued that Unum failed to demonstrate substantial evidence of his alleged improvement. He also argued that Unum failed to take a holistic approach and consider the combined effects of all of his multiple medical conditions, both physical and psychiatric in nature. He also argued that Unum violated the 2018 Department of Labor regulations by failing to give him Unum's peer review reports and give him an opportunity to respond. And, of course, argued that Unum had a history of biased claims administration, and the court should take that also into consideration in making its decision. The court amazingly rejected each one of these arguments and specifically stated that it wouldn't consider Unum's bias because the bias had ended before 2003. What? Now, I will tell you, as an ERISA attorney who deals with Unum claims denials and terminations, they've learned how to better hide its bias claims techniques, and it hasn't changed one bit. It's up to us lawyers to educate Unum the court about Unum's continued bias claims administration. Now, that can be hard to do in an ERISA case because discovery is limited depending on where you live. And it's hard, therefore, to get the courts to help us develop that evidence. So what do I try to do in a Unum case appeal? Well, I track the tricks cited in the Uniform Settlement Agreement and outline them in my appeal and document how this has progressed. It hasn't ended. And you can see, based on reported case law, how they're continuing to use these tricks or to deny or terminate claims. I have a bank of information about the Unum peer review doctor, so I can include that information in my appeals. Because guess what? That hasn't changed. We see the same repeat offenders over and over. Now, that includes information regarding redacted prior reports that the repeat offending doctor has issued, prior depositions, if any, and court decisions involving that particular peer review doctor, because we can get at those using a system called PACER. I don't want the courts to think or mistakenly accept Unum's allegation that it has cleaned up its act, because it hasn't. Now, there are some ways to get other information. If we've had an individual disability insurance claim with Unum, we have the ability to take depositions. And I will use depositions that I've taken or other lawyers have taken that are publicly available to really load up my appeal with all of this information so that the court can see for their own eyes that Unum has learned from their mistakes to quote unquote do it better, but they're still doing the same thing that got them into trouble. Got it? Let's take a break.
Have you been robbed of your peace of mind from your disability insurance carrier? You owe it to yourself to get a copy of Robbed of Your Peace of Mind, which provides you with everything you need to know about the long-term disability claim process. Request your free copy of the book at kvlaw.com today.